Tangled in Tuscany. Chapter 13. The Distance We Keep. The morning light was sharp and golden, cutting clean angles across the stone floor of the guesthouse. Sophia stood at the small kitchen counter, steeping a bag of chamomile in her favorite chipped mug, one she'd borrowed from the main house after discovering the design looked like grapevines etched in ink. It felt earned, like something she'd chosen to keep, not something she was just passing through. Steam curled toward her face. She closed her eyes and breathed it in, grateful for the quiet. Things had shifted. Not overnight. Not in any dramatic, cinematic unraveling. But since the kiss, since that slow, anchoring moment outside the guest house, there had been space. Luca hadn't pulled away in any obvious way. He still passed her in the kitchen with a gentle brush of his hand. Still asked about her shots. Still stood next to her during team meals like his body remembered hers. But something in the air between them had cooled. Not from disinterest, from uncertainty, maybe even fear. Sophia understood it more than she wanted to. She'd felt it before, when things had crossed from curiosity into something more dangerous. Wanting someone was simple. Needing them was where things got complicated. She took a sip of tea and leaned against the counter, watching the olive trees shift in the wind beyond the small kitchen window. The morning was crisp, the kind of late September air that carried both promise and warning. The harvest was nearing. Work had intensified around the vineyard. Matteo had added new color-coded markers to the rows. Chiara had started keeping a clipboard she'd refused to touch all summer. Even Alessia looked more wound up, muttering to herself in between tasks, and tapping her foot through staff meals like she was counting minutes instead of beats. Sophia hadn't expected to care this much. But she did, not just about Luca, about the vineyard, about the people, about whether the fruit would hold out one more week, or whether the weather would snap its fingers and ruin everything. And that meant she'd started shooting differently. No longer just golden light landscapes or romanticized stills of sunlit grapes. Now she focused on hands, stained, calloused, weathered, on tools worn smooth from years of use, on the quiet tension of preparation. Her photos were still beautiful, but now they were grounded, like she was maybe more than she wanted to admit. A knock came at the door. Sophia startled, sloshing tea onto her wrist. She set the mug down and crossed the small room. When she opened the door, Chiara stood on the other side, holding a basket that smelled like cinnamon and yeast. "I brought bribery," Chiara said cheerfully. "Alessia's walnut cornetti. She baked at dawn and won't stop muttering about delivery delays and fermentation windows. So I escaped. You want one?" Sophia stepped aside and gestured her in. "You had me at cinnamon." They sat by the window on mismatched stools, tearing flaky pastry apart with their fingers. Chiara glanced around the space. "You look settled." Sophia tilted her head. "Is that your polite way of saying I've overstayed my welcome?" "Not at all. More like you've stopped hovering and started inhabiting. Big difference." Sophia picked a crumb from her lap, avoiding Chiara's gaze. Chiara nudged her. "Things weird with Luca." Sophia hesitated. "Not weird, just quieter." Chiara studied her for a beat. Quieter isn't always bad. Sometimes it means someone's thinking instead of reacting. Or retreating. Sophia said softly. Chiara didn't argue. She just passed her another piece of pastry. Sophia broke it in half and stood, brushing her fingers clean. "In the afternoon," Chiara said as Sophia moved toward the sink. "A truck's coming with the cork shipment. Want to help me inventory?" Sophia glanced over. "Sure. I've always dreamed of a glamorous cork counting career." Chiara grinned. "We can't all be vineyard muses. Some of us have to do the grunt work." Sophia smiled but said nothing. The truth was, she liked the grunt work. She liked learning the names of the vines, understanding how the tanks worked, seeing the way Luca closed his eyes when he tasted something in development. Lately, her photos felt more like memory than performance. She wasn't just capturing the vineyard anymore. She was becoming part of it. And that was the scariest shift of all. In the bottling room, the usual buzz was replaced by clipped voices and tight movements. Something was off. Sophia arrived in time to see Alessia speaking with one of the logistics coordinators, her hands firm on her hips, eyebrows drawn in irritation. "That was supposed to be here yesterday," Alessia said sharply. "We can't start capping without the cork delivery." Luca stood near the tanks, arms crossed, jaw tight. He wasn't speaking, but his posture radiated tension. "What happened?" Sophia asked quietly, approaching Chiara at the table. Chiara grimaced. "Cork supplier missed the shipment. Some customs mix-up. We're stalled until it gets cleared or replaced." Sophia frowned. "Is there a workaround?" "Not unless we start using synthetic closures," Alessia muttered, overhearing them. Which Luca would rather bottle with old shoes than consider. Luca didn't respond. But Sophia could feel the weight of the delay pressing on him. She lifted her camera instinctively, catching the light bouncing off a row of empty bottles. She froze mid-shot, aware of Luca's eyes on her. A pause, a flicker of something unspoken. Then he turned away. That afternoon, while the bottling room simmered in stalemate, the vineyard workers shifted focus to preparing for the final round of blending tastings scheduled later in the week. Chiara organized barrels. Matteo sampled sugar content. Sophia found herself in the main cellar, documenting the quiet flurry. She moved with more purpose now. Not just taking beautiful images, but archiving progress, pressure, moments that told the story of a vineyard at a crossroads. Luca entered near dusk. He looked tired, not physically, but in a way that made his shoulders curve slightly inward. "You don't have to photograph this," he said after a long silence. Sophia lowered her camera. "I want to." Another pause. "I'm not good at this," he said quietly. She met his eyes. "At letting someone in. At knowing what to do once I do." The air between them tightened, filled with what wasn't being said. Then footsteps echoed from the stairs, and the moment collapsed. "Viola." "Evening," she greeted. Too casually. She glanced between them, as if clocking the tension. Then to Sophia she added, "Walk with me." Sophia hesitated, then nodded. They emerged into the lavender dusk, boots crunching softly over gravel. The air smelled like rosemary and old stone. Viola spoke first. "You care about him." Sophia didn't answer. "You don't have to confirm it," Viola said. "It's obvious." They walked in silence until they reached the olive grove. Viola leaned against a tree and looked out at the horizon. "You know," she said slowly, "I used to think patience was love. That if someone needed time, the best thing I could do was wait." Quietly, hopefully, Sophia studied her face. "But sometimes," Viola continued, "time isn't what they need. It's space to stay the same." Sophia felt something shift inside her, not anger, not even sorrow. Just a clarity she hadn't let herself admit. "Don't wait too long for someone to choose you," Viola said gently. "You're worth more than hesitation." Sophia nodded slowly. Then, without speaking further, turned and headed back toward the vineyard. The vines rustled in the breeze, whispering things she wasn't ready to say aloud. The courtyard was quieter by late afternoon. The last hum of activity had shifted back toward the cellars. Sophia lingered near the rosemary hedge, fingers brushing the cool ceramic rim of her mug, still faintly warm from the mint tea Chiara had brought her earlier. The air held a muted warmth. Less summer, more the edge of something preparing to fade. She hadn't meant to stay out this long. But something about Viola's words still echoed in her mind. "Don't wait too long for someone to choose you." It wasn't said with malice. It hadn't needed to be. It was simply true. The door to the cellar creaked open behind her. Sophia turned. Luca stood there, sleeves rolled, shirt flecked with dust and shadow. A faint curve of sweat darkening the collar. He looked like he'd been working through a storm no one else could see. "I didn't mean to interrupt," she said softly. "You didn't?" He stepped out into the courtyard, the sun casting a golden outline around his shoulders. For a moment, he didn't speak. Just stood there, hands on his hips, head slightly tilted as if sorting through a dozen conversations in his mind. Then he nodded toward the vine-covered slope behind the bottling room. "Come on." Sophia blinked. "Where?" He glanced back, something unreadable in his eyes. Somewhere I go when the world gets too loud. They walked in silence through the back path, past low rows of late-season Sangiovese, the soil beneath them warm and dry, the vines thick with clusters just days from harvest. It wasn't the main slope. This patch was quieter, set apart. Wild chamomile dotted the edges. Bees hovered lazily between blooms. A hawk circled high overhead. At the far end stood a low stone wall, crumbling in places, solid in others, bordering what once might have been a gardener's corner or old sitting ledge. A single bench rested there now, facing west toward the valley. Luca sat first, elbows on knees, gaze distant. Sophia lowered herself beside him, careful to keep space between them, but not too much. For a while, they just watched the hills. The light began to shift. Finally, Luca spoke. "I almost left," he said, voice low. "Not after my father died. Before." Sophia turned to him gently. "I was going to sell my share of the vineyard." He continued. "Move to Verona. I had contacts, ideas, nothing grand. Just something mine. Something quieter." She didn't interrupt. Just let the words unfold. "I thought maybe if I got away, I could breathe. Not because I didn't love the vineyard," he said, glancing at her, "but because I didn't know if I could love it on my own terms. I was so deep in his shadow, I couldn't tell where his legacy ended and I began." Sophia exhaled. "That makes sense." Luca gave a faint, humorless smile. "It didn't to a lot of people. They thought I was selfish. Alessia was furious, said I was abandoning something sacred. And you stayed." He nodded once. "Because then he died. And suddenly, everything I wanted felt like betrayal. Leaving didn't feel like a choice anymore. It felt like erasing him." There was a rawness to his voice, not jagged, but worn smooth, like stone shaped by years of holding back. Sophia's heart ached. "That's a heavy thing to carry." He looked at her then, really looked. "I stayed because I loved him. And I buried that love in the work. But it's only recently." His voice faltered. "Only since you came here that I've started wondering if it's okay to want something more than just the vineyard." Sophia felt the world shift slightly beneath her, not because of the words, but because of the way he said them. Like a man turning the handle of a locked door for the first time. "I'm not asking you to run," she said gently. "I know. And I'm not asking you to stay for me either. I know that too." She reached for his hand. Just for a moment. Just enough. And then let it go. They didn't need more than that. Not yet. The wind stirred around them, dry leaves lifting from the path below. The scent of sun-warmed thyme thick in the air. From somewhere near the lower field, they heard Chiara laughing, and the distant clink of barrels being shifted echoed through the breeze. Luca stood slowly, brushing dust from his hands. "Come on. If Matteo catches us slacking, he'll stage a coup." They returned to the main slope, just as the workers were setting up a late afternoon break beneath the awning near the olive grove. Chiara had laid out a few crates as impromptu tables, draped them in linen, and filled old ceramic bowls with figs, almonds, and chunks of fresh bread. Someone had chilled bottles of sparkling water and young vermentino. Matteo had already claimed the shade, his boots kicked off and his hat pulled low. Sophia hesitated at the edge. Then Alessia waved her over, patting the space beside her on a bench. "Come on, city girl. Sit, eat, pretend we haven't converted you." "I never stood a chance," Sophia said, laughing as she accepted a glass of wine and a fig. The breeze lifted her hair. Luca sat across from her, sun in his eyes, but his smile easy now. Grounded. As the workers ate and joked and passed around plates, Sophia lifted her camera once, then lowered it. Not everything needed documenting. Some things were better lived. She dipped a fig into the olive oil, watching as Chiara launched into a dramatic retelling of the time a wild boar crashed a harvest picnic 2 years ago. Sophia leaned back against the bench, letting her eyes drift toward the hills, the scent of earth and wine and sweat settling into her skin. She felt it then, not like a thunderclap, but like a low warmth in the bones. Belonging. Not full, not certain, but real. Here, she wasn't just taking pictures. She was part of the picture.